They say that the first casualty of war is truth. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the mistakes that I've made right here on my platforms in forecasting suburbs, in forecasting cities, and in forecasting the economy. We're obviously not at war, so it's not a perfect quote, but I think it behooves content creators like myself that have a fairly large audience that trusts them and looks to them for market intel to make money. I mean, that's what I want to do. I want to help you guys make a lot of money so that you can enrich the lives of yourself and your family. But I've made mistakes, and I think it really is important to give a 360 vision of my predictions and where they've been wrong. I always talk about where they've been right, and that's easy to do. Everyone does that. But where are they wrong, and why are they wrong, and then what do we do about that? No one does that. And so I think it's almost like, oh, everyone is a self-professed genius, but to err is human, and so we need to be honest and truthful in where we've been wrong and where we could improve, because we can all improve. The best skill in life is to be able to learn how to learn, because as soon as you think, I already know that, you shut yourself off to so much possibility. So in this episode, I'll go through 4 mistakes that I've made right here on this platform over the years, and the lesson that I and you can take away from that, and also the so what. Okay, this is the lesson, but what do I do now based on that? All right, hopefully you're gonna stick with me right till the end. The first mistake that I made was back in, I think it was 2020 or very early 2021. I released a video that talked about how Brisbane, the overall city, the Brisbane property market won't boom. It won't boom like, like hugely. It will go up, but it won't like massively skyrocket. And of course, fast forward another 2 or 3 years, it did massively skyrocket. And now I did update a lot of my commentary a few months later to say, yes, Brisbane is likely to do very well, but why did I get it wrong in that sort of few month period? What went wrong? The thing that I got wrong was looking at supply. Supply was huge. There was a lot of stock on market, a lot of building approvals, a lot of land around, not just Brisbane City Council, I should say, more around Logan City Council, around Moreton Bay, around Ipswich City Council, Springfield Lakes, etc. And so what I failed to recognize was just how much construction costs were rising, okay? And it wasn't really apparent back then. If you rewind back to 2020, no one was really talking about construction costs, okay? No one was really talking about labor bottlenecks, about a skills shortage in the labor market. Okay, but all of those things eventuated so much so that even a lot of these areas, like I would still not buy in these areas, by the way, like Ripley, west of Brisbane, they actually increased in value in double digits, whereas I would never have bought there, and I still wouldn't buy there, and I still wouldn't buy there in hindsight, but they still went up. And even though they had thousands of lots, thousands of blocks that were approved and to be developed, a lot of that was slowed down because of construction costs, because of bottlenecks, supply chain bottlenecks, and because of a labor shortage. And of course, the COVID lockdowns meant that you couldn't always construct. So I failed to recognize these 3 elements ahead of time, and also therefore I failed to see that the supply wouldn't actually be as much of a hindrance on Brisbane as I thought. Now, of course, I made that video in late 2020 or early 2021, and as those 3 things became apparent over the preceding months, changed the commentary and etc. But that's still a lesson, okay? The lesson is supply is still the enemy of growth, but in times where that supply actually can't get out of the ground for whatever reason, bottlenecks, labor shortage, then it can give a short-term boost anyway. So what do we do about that? Well, the so what from that lesson is that the structural cost of property in Australia is rising because construction costs, although they're not rising as much anymore, they're not really dropping either. All right, the labor shortage, although it's not as bad as what it was, it's not really being rectified or remediated anytime soon either. So the so what is that the structural costs of both places, property in Brisbane and nationally, is going up, and that's what creates a floor under property prices long term. And these sorts of supply side constraints and restraints and factors need to be really deep dived or deep dove, whatever the word is, before deciding where to invest, both at the GA, city, and suburb level. That's number one. Number two, I got interest rates wrong. I remember back in 2020, even start of 2021, I was talking about how interest rates aren't going to rise anytime soon, guys. I think I did so many videos on that. In hindsight, it's a little bit embarrassing, and I want to be open and honest about that because, once again, I think respect is two ways. You guys follow me, and I think I should respect you, and I do respect you, and that means also giving a 360 view of my failures. And if you recall back to 2021, 2022, you'll probably remember basically every economist, every bank, every global world leader, the government, the central banks, even you guys probably were thinking back in 2020, start of 2021 when the world was quote unquote crumbling under COVID, the interest rates aren't going to rise anytime soon. Like, that's the last thing we want. And then lo and behold, 12 to 14 months later, I think it was April or May, that's when they started rising. So I got that wrong, okay? And of course, if you do fast forward 6 months or even 8 months towards the end of 2021, of course, I had also changed my tune because we can only provide commentary on the set of data that's in front of us, okay? If you have a universe to comment on, you comment on that universe. But if the planets change their course, or there's added planets, or the stars are realigning themselves, then you can only comment upon that once they've done so. The field changes, the elements in the field change, and so we can only comment on that. But I think in hindsight, the lesson there is to not make your mind up based on what one person is saying, or what 2 people are saying, or even what 100 people are saying, okay? Because 100 out of 100 people almost back then were saying, look, it's not till 2024 that interest rates will rise. The way to go about this is to look at history, because had I done that in a more eloquent fashion, had you guys done that, had economists done that, had governments done that, had central banks done that, then you would have found that when big shocks happen, like a pandemic, that when big stimulatory forces are at play, monetary or fiscal, then what happens is inflation. And therefore, to combat inflation, you do need to tighten monetary policy. The timing was wrong. Everyone knew monetary policy would need to be tightened, but we got it 1 or 2 years wrong initially. But I think going back in history, we could have done better at that by looking at previous decades and what had occurred then. So what's like the so what? What's the takeaway from this lesson from number 2? Is to be educated from both a wide source of sources and also sources in history, okay? What's gone on in the past, not just people commenting on the present. That's number 2. Number 3 is a suburb called Woodridge. I remember doing a video, once again, I think this was back in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, or early 2021, and I talked about how I would never buy in large parts of Logan City Council. Now, fast forward, a large parts of Logan City Council have gone up like 50%, all right? So to some extent, I have my tail between my legs, and it's kind of, oh, hey, how did I get it so wrong? But let's just retrace that and understand that. One of the reasons I was saying we should never buy in Woodridge, to pick an example, is because the percent of renters is like 60, 70, 80%. So almost every property is a tenanted property, or in other words, a investment property and a rental property. And so that's one of the reasons I would never had said that back then as well. And the reason for that is when you have such competition between landlords, when the market cools, and the market hasn't cooled yet, might cool in 5 years, might cool in 10 years, then rents, they basically drop off a cliff because every property is an investment property. If tenants, for some reason, don't want to live in that area, then all of these landlords not only have vacant properties, but they're all probably likely to sell at similar times, and so their property value tanks. And so even though it's gone up 50%, it could very easily come down. I'm not saying it will, but there's added risk for that to occur. That was my rationale back then, and of course it's easy to say, oh, PK, you got it wrong. And from a growth perspective, I can definitely say I got Woodridge wrong, but what's the lesson? The lesson is that regardless of the data and how bad it may be for a sophisticated investor, there is a large portion of unsophisticated investors that if there's enough of them, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so what you had is a lot of Sydney folks, Melbourne folks, might have been you, and congratulations if you did. You have these people that have FOMO, and it's like, oh my God, Logan City Council, Woodridge, let's say, under 500K, I can't get this in Sydney, Melbourne, the yield is 6%, it's a no-brainer, let's get in, even though, it's crime-ridden, there's huge tenant attrition, landlord insurance cost is high because of the tenant quality, almost every property is a tenanted or is a investment property, so rent's unlikely to go up as much as other areas, etc., etc., etc. I could go on, but regardless, you guys have made money. So the principle or the lesson is that if there's enough FOMO, property markets do well regardless of anything. And there was probably 1,000 buyers agents getting their clients in from down south into Logan City Council in a place like Woodridge. Now, what's the so what of that lesson? What's the takeaway from that lesson? I still maintain my policy and my principle. That is a suburb like Woodridge that if I was in 2021 again, I would still let that one go to the keeper. So for those of you who don't know cricket analogy, there's a bowler who bowls and in test cricket, there might be, the ball might kind of land just near your feet, it might be perfect to kind of have a swing at, but there's always a risk that if it's swinging out or pitching away from you a little bit, there's a bit of movement in the pitch, you might nick it and you get caught and you get out, into the keeper or into the slips. So Woodridge is that kind of suburb. If it's coming, one part of your brain's like, yeah, I should smack it through cover for 4. But if it's swinging out and it doesn't have the best data and long-term prospects like Woodridge, it doesn't, then that's one I'm inclined to let go. And yes, it might in fact have been a great shot to play. I could have made 50% growth in a few years, but why not let that one go to the keeper and wait for the next ball that's a little bit less risky, a little bit closer to you. Maybe it's more of a full toss or a better half volley, and then with lower risk, smack that one, through covers for 4. Hopefully that analogy made sense to you. So I'm happy that I haven't invested, that clients haven't invested in Woodridge, because we bought in other places at the same time, even in the Logan City Council area, like Slacks Creek, Daisy Hill, even a place like Crestmead, with better data, with better long-term prospects. But nonetheless, I still want to say that the Woodridge, I got it wrong, but in hindsight, I would still have let that one pass to the keeper. Now, the last one I want to talk about is Hobart. Back in 2021, even the start of 2022, I said, look, Hobart, we've been buying in Hobart. Clients have been buying there since 2017. Personally, I've been buying there since 2015. It had a huge run, and around 2021, 2022, I thought, look, this can't continue. There's no way this price momentum can continue. And so I made the call right here on these platforms that, this is kind of the top of the market. Lo and behold, it carried on going for another 6 to 12 months. So I got that wrong in terms of timing the top. Now, I've never really got it wrong in terms of identifying a suburb that's gone on to go down in value. But I have, like I've said on numerous occasions, including some examples today, identified areas that I thought wouldn't grow more, but they have in fact gone on to. The lesson from Hobart is that when markets have underperformed for a long time, the boom can also carry on for a long time. And Hobart was one such market previous to 2015 for almost 10 years or more. It had done almost nothing. So the so what from this lesson is that find these areas that may have done really well in the last 1 or 2 years, but over the last 10 years, 20 years have underperformed. And you might be surprised that their boom lasts more than the average of 2 to 4 years, which is the typical duration of a property market booming. It might go on for longer. So I'm seeking to bring transparency. I don't know anyone else who's doing this, but I respect you guys enough to do this. So thank you for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments. Cheers.